Welcome to Around the Corner, a podcast about leadership and organizational performance. I'm Ayanna James.
And I'm Megan Liu. Welcome to Season 1, where we talk with 9 future-focused leaders and dig into their stories and perspective, as well as wisdom about driving change and leading into the future. At Strad, we believe that leadership is the engine of performance, and our work creates the pathways to make that possible.
Conversations like this podcast help shape our own work with leaders, and we are excited to share with you. Perhaps you'll be challenged or take away an insight that enriches your own leadership journey. Welcome to Around the Corner.
Today, we're in conversation with Minister Rebecca Alty, a leader whose journey has taken her from serving as Mayor of Yellowknife to becoming Canada's Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations. Rebecca's story is about breadth and conviction. She has led in municipal government, where collaboration is everything, and now at the federal level, where decisions shape nations and generations. Across these roles, she has modeled a philosophy of leadership rooted in listening, balancing trade-offs, and creating the conditions for trust and change.
In our conversation, Rebecca reflects on leadership as an individual and collective act. We also hear her perspectives on the strategy required to set direction in complex systems and on performance, not just as outcomes, but as the way we bring teams and communities along the journey. She shares the Northern perspective she brings to Ottawa, principles of humility, resilience, and community, and why she believes that leadership in Canada means saying yes to possibility and working together across difference. We are honored to welcome Rebecca Alty to Around the Corner. Well, welcome to another episode of Around the Corner. We are here with Minister Rebecca Alty. Hands up waving. And we're delighted to be in conversation with you today, Rebecca. Just to orient our listeners and our viewers, where are you physically right now? Where are you taking this call from?
Right now, I am in Ottawa. I'm in my parliamentary office, and so when I look out the window, I've got a great view of Parliament. And so, yeah, that's where I am this week. We're sitting, of course, and then I've do my back and forth between Ottawa and Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories.
Okay, great. Rebecca, I personally am just delighted to be in this conversation with you. You and I have been friends, working colleagues over the past few years and done some collaboration work when you were sitting as mayor of Yellowknife. But a lot has changed in the past few months. Just as a human being, bring us into the tent. What's it been like, the change from being in Yellowknife, sitting in that seat, to now being in Ottawa and your role there?
Yeah, so I guess the last time I sat as mayor was in March, and then I put my name forward to run for the Liberal Party and hit the ground running, campaigning for, was it 35, 36 days in April, and was elected. Big thanks to everybody in the Northwest Territories. And about a week after that, I was down here in Ottawa starting MP orientation, a little boot camp to show us around. And I got a call from the Prime Minister asking if I would serve as the Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, which was a huge honor. I have great respect for that role, for the work being done, and to be able to take my experience from the Northwest Territories and bring it to Ottawa and not only amplify reconciliation, but amplify the Northwest Territories at the cabinet table was, yeah, really exciting, lots to learn, but also knowing that folks are there to support, and it was great, when it was announced that I was cabinet minister, the support from at home, and not just my family and friends, but really residents being like, how can we help, how can we so it's been a whirlwind couple of months, and now we're into week 2 of the fall session.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. It was quite a story when you got the phone call to be the minister. Do you want to give us a snapshot into that, just a moment? What happens when the prime minister picks up the phone?
Well, you get a bit of an interview, and so they ask you a few questions. And my interview happened on a Tuesday night, and I was down here for the MP orientation, and I was set to go back to Yellowknife on a Saturday morning, and the cabinet was at the time going to be sworn in on the Monday, and so I was like, hadn't heard anything Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, and so I was like, well, it was an honor to have been asked for an interview, and it's an honor to serve as an MP. And but it looks like I'll go home and continue the MP stuff, and then it was like 6 o'clock on a Friday night that I got the call from the Prime Minister, and which was one of my first times talking to him. And the interview is more like at a staff level to make sure everything's good across the board. So yeah, and so then I had to change all my flights and kind of make up a story on why I had to stay. It was like, actually, MP orientation's gonna take a little longer because I couldn't tell anybody uh, why I was staying yet.
Rebecca, we're going to have a lovely conversation about some things that I know you care deeply about: leadership, community, performance at its best level, right? Of people bringing their most authentic selves. To lean in, we at Around the Corner, we start by asking all our guests to give a preliminary perspective. Like, what do the words mean to you? So we'd love to hear you talk about like your definition of
Hmm.
leadership is performance and potential.
Okay. Yeah. Leadership I always think of because like sometimes people will ask like I don't know, what was your first leadership role or whatever, and I would think of when I was 5 and I got my first sister, and that was like my first opportunity to be a leader, and so really helping and listening and guiding, but working together. So expanding on that leadership in the elected spaces, being able to bring concerns forward, but also really hear what people are saying, but to also think a bit more, because sometimes what people are saying, you've got to dig a bit deeper to get to the meaning, and then think of how does it move through the system, because sometimes yeah, people have a problem and they jump right to a solution before defining like what does success look like, or what have we thought of X, Y, and Z? Because once you add that to the formula, the solution might change. So leadership's, yeah, helping, listening, and like working through those complexities together. Performance, that one's probably harder because you could almost think of like performing, performance, but so maybe I'll jump to potential and come back to performance. Um, Potential, I would say, is about what are our hopes and dreams, and how do we work together for that, really like living up to our potential. Uh, Performance, I guess, is how you get there. Um, Making sure that you're showing up the right way in the performance, performing well to get there, and all part of that teamwork.
hmm The performance happens with others.
Hmm. Yeah, and and is a reflection of yourself and what you're doing and how you're showing up, and the whole like uh we can get to this end place, but your performance to get there can hamper your future success in working as a team or as a community. And so it's not just getting to that destination or creating that program or product. It's really how you get there that can hamper or help your future work.
Mm. Yeah, performance has consequences, hey? If it's not only the what, it's the how. And that's, yeah, consequential to future opportunities, future potential.
Yeah, like if I yell at my team and we get to the finish line, the next time, do I even have a team around me? So I think that performance, um, the components in the performance are really important too.
Yeah, the process matters.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not just the outcome,
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, well done.
which is hard because to get something done quickly, on one hand, people want things to happen and they want it to happen quickly, but sometimes we need a bit more work to get there. I feel like a lot of the easy stuff has been done and we're left with like hard things to grapple with.
Rebecca, I'm not surprised to hear you from the get-go immediately put humans into the mix of these definitions, right? It's not just theory, it's not just esoteric concepts. It is grounded and practical in people being a part of it. Talk
Hmm.
to us a little bit, bring us into your tent about how you think about politics, leadership in public space, as a relational activity. Like some people think about politics as a realm of power, exclusively decision making, right? But you think of it, and I know you to think of it and live it as something that's deeply human and relational. Talk to us a little bit about that perspective.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, A, you need a good team to achieve anything. And B, at the next election time, you're gonna need people there that are gonna show up and check the box with your name beside it. So people matter. Um, I think the complexities being balancing the current people with the future, the challenge of voters versus non-voters, so people who are under 18 or people who aren't Canadian citizens, and also really balancing not just going with the majority, but also stepping up and representing the minority when it's really important. So there's the the vocal minority sometimes on Facebook can try to be pushing X, Y, and Z that's not good for the community. But then you think of a lot of rights issues, and it was about standing up for minority voices or um, uh, not status quo. So it's complex stuff and lots of conversations with folks uh, to bring them along on the journey and and be there for the next election.
Okay, so leadership is about helping, listening, guiding, I heard you say. It is definitely about relating with others for various reasons. Does the definition hold when you think about leadership at as a Canadian, someone who's not in the government realm, political realm, the everyday? Um, how is it nuanced? What comes to mind when you think about leadership as a Canadian citizen? What comes to mind?
I think it is about working together, celebrating our differences, so our multicultural country, um, and being able to have that freedom of expression, but not used in a hurtful or harmful like way. Um, and I also think of, you know, Canada's cold, we have rugged terrain, and so there's always been this element of having to work together. So that individual aspect doesn't work when it's minus 40. You do need that community to help out. So I think that element of working together, um, and celebrating and maybe having that curiosity to learn about um, a new culture or something new in our country.
I love words that start with the letter C. So I'm hearing you say like leadership is not, it doesn't exist without collaboration. It
Hmm.
requires curiosity, another great C word, and then that powerful word community, like it fosters community.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which was the really hard part in another C word, COVID, of like it's best that we all stay apart and you can't be and so there's a lot of I think collective healing that we have to do post COVID from our communities in the Northwest Territories post wildfire evacuations. Like there's a lot to have to rebuild from.
Rebecca, we think a lot about in these conversations with seasoned leaders like yourself about leadership also happening in the context of complex systems. And
Mm-hmm.
systems require a bunch of things, navigating priorities, thinking with strategic clarity. How do you want to move? What good looks like at the beginning and at the end. When you are in seat in your leadership role now, how do you think about setting strategic direction in the complexities that you are navigating?
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, it's easier said than done for sure. With like, if anybody that's worked with me has probably heard, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So really getting that discipline on what are the three things, what are the five things that we really want to spend extra energy on. There's tons of stuff in all governments and all businesses, as all humans, we're gonna have to do, but if we've got that little bit of extra time, where are we gonna focus it? And so I always have, for those listening and not seeing my hands, but those kind of, finding those quick, easy wins, but balancing it with investing too in some of those projects that are going to have that big return, but need a bit more work. Um, and I think it is about trying to and communicate the why. And so, I think of right now, we talk a lot about the economy and budgets, and it can get, we'll lose people. But it's like, why do you want to do these major projects? It's because we're looking, for more jobs, that's going to create more revenue for both the individual, but as the government too, to be able to provide those services that you rely on, the hospitals, the schools. And so if we keep on this flat trajectory, we're going to have to make harder. So we're going to have to make hard decisions, but the status quo doesn't make it any easier, and you're going to have to make harder decisions too. So really also balancing, um, status quo doesn't mean easy. Change is hard. Status quo is also going to lead to, potentially harder things in the future. So it's a lot of juggling, triaging, but I would say, to pause on that one, of like, you shouldn't be juggling, triaging, re-triaging like every few minutes. Otherwise, you're not going to accomplish anything. So making sure that you set your priorities and then you follow them, recognizing you've got to do some pivots if X, Y, and Z isn't working, but to really be mindful when you're making those changes. It is still also balancing that current versus future. And I think of housing, and we did a lot of work in my first term as mayor, and in regards to rezoning, um, and it was about getting ready for the future, making the changes, and looking to the past and some of the policies that led us to where we are, and then seeing what policies need to change in order to support the future.
We do
So
lots of work thinking about, call it translation and alignment. So I can imagine, as you're so beautifully describing your portfolio, your area, how are you thinking about lining up, to potentially, the priorities that Carney's setting or across different areas? Are you all having conversations around, call it strategic alignment, priority setting as a team, as a group?
yeah, so there is the overarching seven, and then it is about working across departments to see how we can advance certain ones. So not, um, for example, in my portfolio, it's not every seven that I'm working on. It's my focus in my portfolio is more like the major projects and spending less to invest more, and then working with other. So the major projects one would probably be the one where I'm working across departments the most, and so working with NRCan and transportation and finance. So seeing how how we can all work together, and if so and so does this, what implication does that have on X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it is a lot of those conversations to think of. Um, the consequences or the mitigation or the opportunities or the challenges, and how do we, and what has to go first in the sequencing of events.
Yeah, complex stuff as you think about the outcomes, and to your point, needing to bring along us as citizens in the same way throughout all those processes. Hmm.
Hmm. And how these these major projects are not only unlocking current construction jobs, but really growing that the next sector, if a port or a road is like, what else can grow from there, and the jobs and the snowballing that can happen. So, and what skills and training do we need, and is there enough in that area, or how do we, we're such a big country too that um yeah, that can be a challenge.
Rebecca, sometimes when we talk, it's almost like I can see like there's a whiteboard in your brain and you're just like mapping. You're just like
Yeah.
mapping all the pieces, which is like brilliant and so exemplary of a senior leader like yourself. But here's my question. I have seen you function as a mayor, a leader amongst leaders, and you have modeled for others how to get to that kind of thinking.
Mm.
Talk a little bit about like how do you help others get to this place of being able to not only see but feel and really be curious about the interdependencies, this therefore that, and maybe that, the connections. What have you learned in your leadership about developing that in others?
Mm, I guess it's through, it's a lot of through conversation, um particularly because I'll have similar conversations with, like if I'm campaigning, I'm going and knocking on 100 doors in one night, and so talking to people and then being like, oh, that created an aha moment, or I learned this from that interaction, and I'm going to bring that forward. Somebody explained something to me, and I loved this one where it was, they want to build housing, and they want to, create training programs to then help build more housing. And he was talking about using the whole moose. And so not just focusing on housing, and I was just like, oh, using the whole moose. I like that, to be able to, that might help when I'm talking to somebody else down the way. And so, yeah, being able to see, to talk through clarity, or be like, oh, that was poorly described. That didn't resonate. I've gotta think that through more, because it's not landing for somebody else. And then, yeah, a lot of listening to common problems, then being like, okay, I'm seeing a trend here. How do we get up and deal with it at a bigger level, and not just like problem every individual person? There's something wrong with the system.
Paying attention, metaphors, trends. Yeah, super sophisticated.
Many journeys, and yeah, making mistakes and then trying to do better next time.
Mm-hmm. Let's add humility to the list then. It
Yeah.
takes all of it. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, there's definitely like learning from others, when other people mess up, being like, ooh, duly noted. Mhm, not what I want to do or see my name in.
Rebecca, you've developed people, you've listened to constituents, lots of good listening. You've also, as you hinted earlier, worked with teams to mobilize for action and change. Um, Tell us about leading a high performance team. Uh, and I'm going to prompt you here because I know you and I have had a lot of conversation about trust and architecture of trust. What has worked well? What do you take forward, evergreen, consistently in the way that you stand up your teams, work with them to get the best out of your people and with your people?
I think first and foremost, what just came to mind was working on myself. And so I realized that when I am overwhelmed, and I'm not going for my walks, that then the next day I'm like snappy and nobody's gonna show up and be inspired by this snappy person that like so really making sure that like I'm filling my oxygen tank at the end of the night or trying to eat my vegetables during the day. Um, but then, I guess it is still like the self focus of how am I showing up? Am I, you know, taking that time to listen? Or am I trying to multitask and read on my phone while somebody's talking to me? Um, and really seeing where people's strengths are and trying to use them in those spaces. Um, and the hard one, but what I really liked with city council was that there was differing, like we weren't part of parties or anything like that. But some people were like conservative holding card holding members, others probably NDP and stuff, and like actually being able to to talk and hear different views and um you know at the time sometimes you just want to like pull your hair out, throw your hands up and be like, what are they thinking? They're so wrong. But it's is a good exercise to like reflect on and how can you get to a better solution by listening to those diverse perspectives. um and when I think of my community, we're not all monolithic. And so the question they have or the concerns they have, I have to think about those and how do we address them? Like, okay, if everybody's asking that question, clearly that hasn't been communicated very well. So what do we change? How do we do better? Because me just going and repeating the same thing clearly isn't going to work. And so, yeah, it's a lot of, I guess, reflecting when I'm walking. Yeah, little combo
Mhm.
there.
Rebecca, let's stay there a little longer. I'm really curious because there's something in your ability, superpower of the depth and the breadth of listening. And you're doing something on the walk that gets you to like integrating and feeling the aha, seeing the aha. Like, what's happening there? How do I practice that? Like, what are you doing in that?
I would say like there's an importance of thinking back and reflecting on your conversations. Did that go well? Did that not? How can I do better next time? But not ruminating, not kicking yourself. One of the interesting, it's an expression that works for me, but is like once you catch yourself ruminating on something negative, is I just say recycled thought. And so I'm just like, that's done. That's a recycled thought. Let's move on. Um, and so whatever catchphrase would work for you, but there's a point that we've got to be like, time out. Um, let's think of something else. Don't beat yourself up over it. I think also just if it was easy, it'd be done already. We've got to do hard things. So really taking that deep breath and knowing that it might not be changed tomorrow or the next day or the next day, but are you taking the right steps to lead to that better solution? Um, because the challenging thing with, well, there's lots of challenging things with elected, because it's also like, unless you elect a majority government, you've got to make compromises. You've got to work with others, like what you said you were going to do. You might have to pivot a little bit to get 90% of the idea across the finish line. So, which, voters don't always um, see or like appreciate or understand. Um, but you do have to like sometimes make that incremental progress.
Hmm. Rebecca, what have you learned, if we keep going, on this notion of trade-off around that? You may have a particular plan or a particular outcome that you're stewarding towards. If a minority government, you need to turn in different ways. How are you balancing the notion of trade-off in your leadership?
Easy ones are easy, and we don't even think of them as trade-offs. It was probably be those harder ones that really are like your core values, and really knowing what your core values, and like, this is a line and I'm not gonna cross it. Um, or thinking of like, is this a trade-off, but it's the incremental step, and we'll be able to do this after that. And so really kind of thinking through, um, and also thinking of mitigation of like, we'll do this trade-off, but this is what we're going to do to mitigate some of those consequences. Or so that's where I think taking a bit of time to think through those decisions. Or and then you can modify your implementation plan, or add those mitigating, or we're going to have to bump up our comms more to explain why this trade-off was needed. um One of the things, like, I think of the overhaul in the zoning bylaw too, and um was just trying to like really dig at like what people's fear was. What did they really think was going to, you know, monumentally change their life? And then working through like, oh, actually, that won't happen because of X, Y, and Z in the regulations. And because sometimes, yeah, we can just like really blow up this idea in our head and get us working. And it's like, let's take a deep breath. Let's work through, because maybe, what you fear, it could happen because I hadn't thought of it. And so, either I can talk you through why that won't happen, or you've made me think, and we've got to put in some more mitigations to stop that.
It just makes me think that so much of the leadership you're describing, Rebecca, is consistently like leadership as change leadership. And like the sign, yeah, you're nodding.
Oh, yeah, because as much as people don't like change, they don't want status quo either. And you can't have both. As much as we love to talk out of both sides of our mouths as humans, at the end of the day, and change is hard, but it also, sometimes is just hard for a minute. And that's another one that's a great, you know, not will I regret it, but like the 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years.
Hmm.
So there's
Hmm.
like the simple example of like, will I regret eating this cake in 5 minutes? Yeah, probably, because it's gonna hurt my belly. 5 months, I won't remember it. 5 years, I won't remember it. But so yeah, lots of different like decision making models that are helpful for the scale of decisions that you're doing. That's not one that I use for more complex decisions. Yeah.
Just in case listeners were wondering,
Whew. Yeah,
The,
yeah,
the cake.
yeah. But the rezoning one is
Mm,
like,
yeah.
in 5 minutes, are you gonna be still upset? Probably. 5 months, 5 years? No. Yeah, you're probably gonna be like, hey, thanks for creating housing 5 years ago. Really appreciate having a house to live in now. Or like that my kids have a house to live in.
Yeah, that's so required, right? Like being able to be brave and be able to see the horizons. We talk a lot about horizons.
Hmm.
And Rebecca, facilitate the foresight of what will be required. So I'm just your storytelling so beautifully, right? Like systems, horizons, who needs to be involved, and then your own I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but like it sounds like your integrity as a leader, right? To be able to listen, discern, sift, and sort on behalf of and with others.
Yeah, and I guess I do a lot of reading and a lot of podcasts of to think through those. The hard part is listening to people that have different opinions, but it's also such an interesting values discussion of like, you know, how far should I go listening to different perspectives, like, comparisons of other world leaders, and actually how when you always jump to that comparison, it pushes people away because they're like, you're wrong, that's not true, that's not, and so being careful with our comparisons is definitely one I've seen over the years.
Rebecca, this is potentially like a citizen question.
Mm,
Um, as I look at the world right now, it feels that our inability to listen to other thoughts, other perspectives, like to your point along the spectrum, I can imagine is making the world of politics difficult.
mhm,
Um, I guess I'm just curious around, as a political leader, as, someone in Ottawa right now, are you all practicing that differently? Are you talking about that? Are you incorporating that? Yeah, just maybe give us what you can in terms of, line of sight in terms of how that shows up in your collective leadership conversations.
well, I just finished question period, so
Yeah.
but that was the one thing that, like, at the municipal level, we sit there, we listen to each other with different perspectives. We don't give a round of applause to somebody we vehemently disagree with, but that's the one thing I wanted to bring forward in the house is that I don't want to participate in calling names and yelling at people across the way. I think folks can have different opinions and to try to do better at reflecting on them. Um, but yeah, I'd say it's still a journey to get more on board with the like, let's bring some more civility into this. Because if you saw this in any other workplace or in a classroom, like you wouldn't be very impressed with your kids. So let's model that behavior.
How's that going? Is that hard? Because that in itself has changed leadership in terms of, how you're showing up, how you're influencing others. Yeah, what's your temperature check there?
I would say it's with certain people back in the house, it's the temperatures back up. So it will be interesting. We're week 2 now, and there's name calling in the house, and but yeah, I think it would take a pretty big change, but at the end of the day, the only person I can influence is myself, and or these are the actions I can take.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
modeling
yeah,
modeling a different
modeling.
way. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
I think of what you're saying, Rebecca, as a shaper of culture. And I'm curious too about how you think about in your leadership understanding, think about culture. Is it something, some people position it as something to be designed? Others think of it as an outcome of just, practices and ways of being. When you think about the spheres of leadership that you're in, about with yourself, with your team, of course, in the house and more, what's your mental model on the culture, how to shape culture and your role in leading it?
I think it is in observing and trying stuff on of like, oh wow, that the way that person delivered that like really resonated with me. I liked their way of approaching it. Um, and somebody else, like I can have a great deal of respect on how they delivered it, and that wouldn't work for me. It's so, kudos to them, but it's not something I'm going to be trying on. And so then also, I guess, just then noting how people are um, receiving it. So, you know, is this working, uh, or do I need to change something up? The observing and then the modeling behavior.
Hmm. And I hear you saying that culture doesn't happen in a vacuum. The impact matters.
Hmm. Yeah, and that, um, in this situation. this might work, but in this situation, we've got to pivot and try this. Um, but then also, I guess like if I think of question period of, somebody being this great, powerful orator and yelling their point across, or like being the calm and just clearly articulating and then and sitting back down. Um, both can work and probably in different situations too. So just recognizing those the way that you're delivering, whether that's working or not.
And probably super complex in the portfolio that you have right now because you're a stakeholder, is that a fair word?
Hmm.
Multiple audiences, actors and players, um, all receive things land very, very differently with folks. How are you prepped for that, Rebecca? Are you how do you get the inside scoop on like how to better facilitate it and have the better chances of landing well with others when you're navigating the complexity of the system you described?
Yeah, well, I think it is like really reflecting on who is your stakeholder or your partner in or your audience in a certain situation. Are you trying to communicate or persuade an outside partner? Are you trying to get your colleagues' support? Are you trying to influence the opposition? Um, because the way you deliver the messages would be different. Um, so I think we don't do, and that's my background in communications and in communications plans. People are like the target audience, the public, and you're like,
Mhm.
there's no way you're gonna reach 40 plus million people with this one comms plan. There's probably a more specific audience that you're trying to. So yeah, and then recognize that it's not a silo. So when or if you're communicating with one, many people are going to hear, and what's the how's that going to change? So maybe you lose this, the opposition, but all of your all of my indigenous partners, or all the indigenous partners, um and my colleagues are in support. So
Rebecca, what's the leadership edge for you right now? You sound like a master at it. Like you're it
I'm
sounds
like
it's got you to this place.
I'm a student of it, maybe. Um, yeah, yeah. I would say that it has helped being mayor because there you have no real authority. You're the first among equals. You're just one vote in the case of Yellowknife, one of nine, one mayor, eight councillors. Um, but residents think that you have this power, almost sometimes like a dictator, like just do this, and you're like, I can't. There's laws and stuff. Um, so having that, not having that direct power and having to work with colleagues to get to that similar vision or outcome would be, I think, similar to minister and caucus as well as other party members. And then my work, I used to work at Rio Tinto, and that was where was working with um, indigenous partners and ensuring that the mine was adhering to its obligations. And so now, as the Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, making sure the government's adhering to its obligations, and so communicating those obligations to all of my colleagues as well, because it is complex and there's a lot to know and think of. And so just reminding folks to tap onto our department for advice or expertise on X, Y, and Z. But plenty to learn, that's for sure. And just knowing that, I think, is helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, deeply so. I had the privilege of visiting you in Yellowknife, and one of the things that I observed there was the beauty of the North. That's one, but two, like a a beauty, a strength, a power in like the perspective of the North. And there's something around humility, around grit, around
Mm.
resilience, that you come from in a real way. Is that true? Like, are you bringing? Is that part of what how you bring the Northern perspective into the work that you do now, and how it shows up?
Yeah, I would say so. In that, like, I guess just humble beginnings too. Oops, just
Yeah.
about to lose my. There we go. And I would say the North is, you're probably just like one step away from being related to the premier or something like that. And so working across, you know, going to the homeless shelters in the morning and talking to residents, and then going to meet with the premier right after, and being able to listen and express concerns and work through solutions. And I guess as mayor is also just like, you on some days, or some days, like in the span of 2 hours, sometimes you're talking about dogs, and then you're talking about the fire hall, and then you're talking about like people don't have anywhere to park their boats. And so it's definitely a good um, work on your mental to have to really juggle so many different topics and so many different views all at once. And so bringing that into cabinet as well.
Okay, Rebecca, let's step into the future. It's 5 years from now, and someone is podcasting with you, and you're telling the story of what you're most proud of in your leadership narrative the past 5 years. What is that? What do you imagine saying or hoping to be able to storytell about?
I would love to say that we made progress in some of the self-government agreements in the Northwest Territories, both as the MP as well as minister. And so in my travels across the Northwest Territories this past summer, and getting to have the honor of going to Colville Lake, which is a small community in in the northern part of the Northwest Territories, and just actually being on the ground with leadership and understanding their vision and how they're working to implement it, and what the federal government can do, which is what I can do. And so that was really really important, and I would hope that we can make you know bring that self-government agreement across the finish line. Um and yeah, just continuing to advocate for the infrastructure needs in the Northwest Territories, which is a lot of it's just like core needs of to be able to get groceries, to in case of an emergency be able to get out of the community, um, and then across Canada, continuing working with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit partners to um, help them unlock the potential. And so where the federal government's being that barrier, helping to be the voice in the federal government um, to remove those barriers. So that's, I guess, a fair amount well, hopefully we have a 4-year term. It's a minority government, so we never know when we'll be out of office. But yeah.
That's a great mandate, great ambition. And with your minister hat on,
Hmm.
speaking to the Canadians more broadly, specifically like emerging, maybe younger emerging leaders within various sectors, places, locations, geographies. What's the one thing that you want them to know about either your leadership journey or about what's around the corner in terms of leadership on the Canadian context?
Hmm. I think on people's personal leadership journey, the one thing I've had is like, say yes, figure it out later. And so, whether it's being a minister or an MP or the mayor, was like, I didn't know everything, but say yes and don't be afraid to ask for help. s- I think, yeah, sometimes people are scared to take on those opportunities because they're not quite ready, but it's deep breaths and ask for help. And then in regards to like the Canadian society, I would say it's how can we work together more, be out in community more together, just put down your phones and computers and go say hi to your neighbor. Or you know what, the one thing I love is actually looking at poster boards or bulletin boards. We have them in grocery stores up in Yellowknife, and just seeing what the events are in the Northwest Territories. Seeing what upcoming events are. There's lots of free ones. Just go and check it out, and hopefully, you meet somebody new, you have a fun conversation. If you've ever met my mom, she's great at that. And she's got like this treasure trove of really interesting experiences as a result of like getting out there and you never well if, yeah, and if you meet my mom, she's met people on the docks, chitter chattered and helped them find a job. And so yeah, you never really know where that conversation's going to take you.
I love the userability or accessibility of that. Like there are no
Hmm.
obstacles in the way. Everyone can take that next step.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what and I recognize there's challenges for some to take advantage of those. But um, a lot of communities do have those free programs, particularly at the library if you pop in there. So I can just keep checking until you find your community. Totally,
Whatever it might be.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say yes.
Hmm.
hmm
That's amazing. Rebecca, is there anything that you wanted to get out there that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
I guess the one thing is the so Krista Freeland recently stepped down from cabinet, and in listening to folks thank her for her service, one of the things that came up frequently in caucus was how grateful people were for her feedback and encouragement. And so that was the one thing I want to do better at, is like stopping and just thanking people for, X, Y, and Z, or like appreciating their work. Because yeah, I'm sure she doesn't remember every one of those instances, but it clearly had a big impact on the other person. And again, it's free and easy to do. So that's at least my commitment to do better at moving forward.
Rebecca, thank you so much. It
Not a problem.
I'm consistently in awe of knowing you and grateful for your leadership across this country. But today I'm particularly thankful for your thoughtfulness, your ability to slow down, reflect, to pay attention to actually what's happening around you. And so, yeah, as a Canadian, lots of gratitude, and to know that we have a thoughtful, wise leader. Who's part of stewarding this great nation. Really, really thankful for you.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. It's left me uplifted at 5 o'clock to maybe tackle some emails, or maybe just go for my walk now.
Go for the
Go
walk.
for a walk now.
Yeah,
Go for the
yeah,
walk.
yeah.
Yeah. Let it soak
All
in.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ayanna, we just had the privilege of exploring the topics of leadership, performance, and potential with one of our latest cabinet ministers, Rebecca Alty.
The Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations. It was a fantastic conversation. Um, I'm curious, Megan, as to how you experienced it.
hmm
Uh,
hmm
uh, for me, it was definitely a conversation that had the theme of thoughtful reflection and deep and wide listening. Um, what was top of mind for you? as you listened,
Hmm.
partook in the conversation?
I think it was interesting because I found myself listening through maybe at a few different personas or perspectives. And I was flipping between them both as she was talking. I felt like I was listening through the lens of, what are her leadership practices and how are we studying, leadership practices and pulling out those that are leading in complex systems. She just gave such an artful, thoughtful approach to how she's evidencing that in this current environment. And yet I was also found myself leading through the lens of being a citizen, being a
Hmm.
voter, being
Hmm.
someone who cares deeply about our country and, watching
Yes.
productivity numbers myself for the last several years. And I was flipping back and forth. And I think what was lovely is, um, what she was saying on the leadership side. So gave me confidence on the citizen side and vice versa. So, yeah, just to acknowledge that I was hopping back and forth between both as she was chatting away.
Okay, I love that. I want to say more. Gave you confidence
Hmm.
on the citizen side. What did you hear that bolstered that confidence?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, potentially, all of my bias is showing up. Um, but my gosh, are we in a polarized, non-listening, difficult state? Um, and as a citizen, I worry about that. I worry about, the future generations of Canada if we
Hmm.
can't figure out, where we're headed as a country and how we collaborate, compete, contribute on a global basis. And so that's so top of mind for me that I think I was, hearing through that lens, and yet meeting one of our ministers who absolutely understands that and is herself trying to, I think, evidence a leadership practice that takes all of that into consideration and yet is bringing a collaborative mindset, a way of leading with the we in mind, rather than coming at it, which she probably could, with the current practices that we're seeing in other places in the world. She's clearly making, I think, a conscious attempt and modeling what a different kind of political leadership can look like.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm 100% aligned with you. The other thing that stood out for me deeply, again, the context that we're in and we're not listening to each other, is that listening continues to be both foundational, fundamental, and strategic in terms of the maturity, evolution, forward way path making for who we are as a nation, who we
Hmm.
are across sectors, who we are as individuals, citizens, like you're pointing out, and who we are as leaders. Um, I don't, I don't know, I don't know how else to start other than with the self. And I thought Rebecca just did a lovely, humble reminder that it's less helpful to pontificate about how important it is to listen and more meaningful and helpful to get on with it and put yourself in those places where there are multiple voices, there
Hmm.
is difference, there is
Hmm.
diversity, there are uh, perspectives that may push our current understanding, biases, and assumptions. And I just thought that that was such a call to action from the beginning to the end of the conversation. How might you, said listener, how might we take it on ourselves to take quite seriously what that is? I think in the context that we're in, as Canadians and North Americans, some may be saying to themselves or publicly, "We're tired of listening. How much more listening is there to be done?" And it was such a beautiful reminder. There's never enough listening. Let's keep going at it. And let's keep pushing ourselves individually and your lovely word collectively in a way that we can get after that. So I really appreciated her explicitness about it, but also the implicitness
Mm-hmm.
that we have a minister in leadership who is pushing our culture and our cultural conversations to model that for us so we can see what it can look like in a different way.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, she's listening for the sake of better differentiated outcomes and results. And she knows, I think, that those can take place when she truly has an understanding of the needs and that folks can locate those needs in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that is what we might call connection and a leader's ability to understand how to create connection across the system, across stakeholders, across time, across horizons, across political parties.
Mhm.
Um, but she brought that to the table today.
Yeah, I really appreciated the little tool or heuristic that she gave us. That's a recycled
Mm.
thought. That's a recycled thought. I was like, oh, that's interesting because if you get a lot of those in a day, in a week, in a month as a leader, you probably need to be expanding your reading, your listening, your conversation partners, because it was a hint to me about like the wellspring of generative insights. We've got to have less recycled thoughts and we pay attention to the trends, certainly, yes, and we've got to
Hmm.
be expansive enough where there's more listening to be done. And I know we're using
Hmm.
listening here with a capital L. It certainly is knocking on doors and talking to constituents as one part of Rebecca's story. But I think you and I are thinking about this a little bit more broadly in terms of, yes, the who we listen to, who we read, right, who we're paying attention to, the conversations we're having in our neighborhoods, the conversations we're having globally. All of that is part of this expansive notion of listening. So I appreciated, like, right, how many recycle thoughts have I had? And where might I need to go to stretch that? Really
Hmm. Hmm.
tactical
Hmm.
application for me.
Hmm. Okay, Ayanna, next time I have a recycled thought, we'll say, what would Rebecca do?
What Rebecca do? Hashtag. And Megan, I just want to prompt you too, because I know that the questions you asked, Rebecca, were in the space of strategic trade-offs and holding, the near impacts and the longer term consequences. Was there an insight for you, a takeaway, an application um, that you're leaving with post the conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's usually my favorite question, isn't it?
Hmm.
Um, I think we have just listened to a leader that can hold a sense of um, stakeholders, a sense of timing, a sense of interdependence, a sense of, political reality in a system. And I think because she listens so well, she's able to create a plan where she knows trade-offs are going to exist, and to the best of her ability, she will mitigate the trade-offs. And she's very comfortable in that space. And I think as a leader, in all the work that we do in our own leadership journey and growing Strad, that's quite a sophisticated skill set to, one, be able to intellectually think your way through it, and two, be comfortable that that is your role.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, grateful she is where she is. And thankful too for her call to action to all of us to practice a lot of what you're speaking to and practice in our own ways, in our own neighborhoods, and find those accessible points where we can live into our next horizon of our own personal leadership.
Mhm, mhm. Let's go have a coffee with her mom.
That would be lovely. All right, talk
Okay,
soon.
thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Around the Corner, where global impact, human values, and the integration of many intelligences come together to shape the future of leadership. If you found today's conversation meaningful, please follow the podcast and share it with others who are curious about what it takes to lead with courage, presence, and possibility.